Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. My name is Danielle Dion, and I am so excited that you're joining us. We have a YouTube project, and we are working on to repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code of Canada and to answer call to action number 6 from the Truth and Reconciliation Committee reports. And this call to action is to end corporal punishment against children in Canada. A lot of people might think that it is illegal to hit kids, but if it is not. And there's lots of vague laws around that. So we're working really hard to bring public awareness to this issue. And part of that work is to do this video project, and we're encouraging people to write their senators and their MPs. We have a template for you, and we are ready to help you write your MPs. We're also putting a call out to any youth, teachers to get children's voices in on the issue as well. And before we get started and I introduce our team, our topic today is knowing your triggers and breaking cycles. And I'm coming to you, I'm all over the place, but I'm coming to you from the land of the Kwantlen Nation, which is here in Surrey, British Columbia, and also known as the fishing people. And I fished here in the rivers when I was small too, and now considering to join the watershed committee so I can help revitalize the Fraser River, which is around here that has been completely gross now and destroyed. So that's where I'm coming to you at. We're going to go through a series of questions all about what it's like to be triggered. And so I'm going to bring in some of our team members, both here from No Violence for Kids. We have Andrea, the other way, Andrea, also known as Chapon2 on TikTok. And Andrea has been working really hard as an activist to answer call to action 6. And we also have our lovely team member, Amy, which is down there. And Amy is also joining us, and she's been working really hard on the joint statement of physical punishment against children and youth. The joint statement is sponsored by the CHIO, founded by Dr. Joan Durant and Ron Ensom, and she's been working behind the scenes on some administrative tasks on there so we could get out to over 650 organizations across Canada that have built this wonderful coalition. So thank you both for being here. You're ready to talk about triggers?
Yes.
Sure.
Andrea, why don't you welcome yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you've been working on before we get started, and then we'll go to Amy.
Excellent. So first, I'd just like to also acknowledge the land that I am working and living on, which I am so grateful for, which is just the traditional territory of many cultures, including the Wendat peoples, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississauga of the Credit. And I apologize profusely for any mispronunciations, but I am grateful to be working and living on this land. And very grateful to be a part of this group with you, Danielle, and be really trying to raise awareness that it is still illegal to hit children in Canada, something that I actually was unaware of when I had my children 3.5 years ago. So yeah, this repeal is very important to me, and thanks for having me.
So happy you're here. Amy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy, and I live in Deep Cove, North Vancouver, which is the traditional territory of the Tsleil-Waututh people from time immemorial. And this land was also the traditional territory of the Musqueam and Squamish Nation, and I am grateful every day for their amazing stewardship of this beautiful place. I am a child and youth counselor. I'm also here because I'm passionate about seeing assault towards children become illegal in our country. And I'm just excited about what's happening in Canada right now to hopefully make this happen.
Yes, repeal 43. Well, thank you both. It's great that we're here, and I'm so happy that we're making land acknowledgements as well. Well, let's get started. Let's see how fast we can go through these 6 questions, all about what is a trigger, knowing your trigger, and working with parents to break their cycles. So here we go. First question. What is a trigger? And maybe we'll go through this starting with you, Andrea, and then you, Amy. I'll summarize, maybe add a bit, and then we'll go to the next one if we can just do loops like that.
A trigger is something for me that just sort of sends me into the red zone. I go from calm and cool, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I am just immediately sort of enraged. or, intense emotion feelings.
A trigger for me is I am an adult 1 minute, and the next, I won't even say minute, the next second, I feel like a kid again. And even sometimes in the middle of it, from the outside looking in, I'm going, oh my gosh, I sound and look just like a kid. But sometimes I don't realize it's happening, and it's afterwards, and I'm like, wow, I'm really glad there was no camera in my house just 5 minutes ago.
Okay, I can relate to both of those. For me, a trigger is like a physical sensation, and I relate it to like early childhood trauma. And it's like lifelong getting over that. Like, oh, there it is again. And I retreat and I get scared and I go inwards. So I don't do the external. I go inwards and go silent and feel shaky, that kind of thing. So that's what a trigger is like for me.
Mm.
Awesome. Well, let's go on to the next question and let's see how this one goes. Is it normal to be triggered, Andrea?
100,000% absolutely. It is extremely normal to be triggered. And it's funny how you mentioned, Danielle, how when you're triggered you go inward, and when I'm triggered I project. I'm definitely an outward projector, and I know that this is also because this is how I watched my parents deal with their intense emotions. My parents moved outwards when they were getting triggered. And so this is what I observed. And this is behavior now that I have learned when I get triggered to just rage out. And I'm working on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had one parent that went in and one that went out. And when I'm with people I'm very, very comfortable with, I go out, but usually it's hard to tell if I'm having a really intense emotion. As for normal, yeah, 100 and like Andrea said, 100,000% for sure. I think of like, these wonderful guides and teachers of that we have or have recently had, like Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh, and this whole place where they sit, where it's not the absence of these triggers that denotes maturity or whatever, or is what they're aiming for. It's just being aware of them and being really compassionate when we notice them. So I think it's like it's normal, it's human. I think we can't get away from it. Um, and what I've noticed is that in accepting that, it can, the extremes can be less. But trying to like buckle down and get them under control and like improve ourselves, that tends to not really work to try to make them less. So yeah, normal for sure. And also, there's definitely ways to make like the extreme ups and downs more like little smaller bumps.
Smaller bumps. So it's interesting just in that loop of conversation, externalizing, internalizing, accepting that it's normal, which is a relief, right? I think that's helpful just in not knowing that when we're going through it, like this is normal, it's okay. And then what was coming up for me, Amy, what you just were talking about, us reading about resilience and how this word can be taken wrong just today, this morning, actually. And I think it's fascinating to recognize that resilience isn't avoiding emotion and being cold and not having emotion. It's actually welcoming and being able to bounce and like recognize that it's normal to go through life's fluctuations. So I was kind of thinking about, I never really connected resilience with being triggered. But I agree, it has to be normal, right? Like, it just has to be, because I'm wondering now, is there any big, emotions that come on, like going inward or outward? Are we not always relating that to our history and pairing that with, something, our previous experiences? So I really do think it's normal. If we're alive and we've lived a couple years, we're likely going to be triggered. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Thank you both. This is kind of fun. Where do triggers come from? I think we've all kind of touched on this, but I'll start with you, Andrea. Maybe go into it a bit more.
Where do my triggers come from? Definitely my early childhood experiences is definitely triggering for me, especially when I'm dealing with my children. Uh, just one example is I I was really spilly when I was a child, and I would make, I just remember spilling a lot, and my dad, I just remember being so mad at me spilling, total accident, that when my children spill, I don't know, I lose it, you know? I don't know, it's just a response, I go, it's the mess, and I have to clean it up, and it's the same reason I'm sure my father was triggered when I accidentally spilled, And I think we're gonna get into this, but I have a hard time controlling my initial ah. And so now what I've started to do is, we've made a spill, let's clean it up. And I kind of use my intense outburst and turn it into a jingle because this feeling is so normal, but it's like this for me is uh, just something that triggers me, and I know for a fact it is because of passed on from my early childhood experiences. I can't think of any other triggers in terms of. I feel like it all comes down to early childhood experiences. I also think that triggers for me are um, when I have made a mistake and I've made, and I fail at something. I find I am very quick to get emotional about my personal failures. And I think that this also comes down to my early childhood experiences, where I always, I'm a big perfectionist and I'm a big people pleaser. And so when I make mistakes, it's very shameful for me. And I think that this sends me, when I'm feeling shame, it sends me into sort of a high emotional zone. And so I think that also is where my triggers come from. Shame.
Yeah, ditto everything. First, you had me thinking about what I do when my kid spills something. Uh-oh. Um, but yeah, I have started asking myself, why do I lose it? And so often it's because I think that there's some judgment um, coming from somewhere. It's like, okay, so somebody just saw me screw up, but it's not even a conscious thing. Like there's nobody there, and my
Mm,
my son isn't sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, mom, like just be perfect." And I'm so mad at you that you did that. As if when he does something, it's some reflection on me, on whether or not I'm a good enough parent. Did I provide everything for him so that this whatever happened wouldn't happen? Um, there's so many things that I can point to in a day. Usually things that I think I coulda, shoulda, woulda done and didn't,
mm,
rather than things that I did wrong. It's like, "Oh, I missed this opportunity. I could have done this." So, this running dialogue that, like, it has no connection with reality. There's nobody,
mm,
marking this report card. But in my head, it's this huge failure. Um, and I often find that if I can stop afterwards and be like, why did that upset me so much? It is that. So, and that also is from my childhood, 100%. Um,
mm,
but it's interesting that we carry these internal dialogues with us even now. And like I said before, the thing that has helped me more than anything is just like giving myself a break, not trying to
mm,
talk myself out of anything, not trying to like give myself a compliment instead of an insult, but just being like, um, I know why I'm doing this. And so, I'm going to be my own most compassionate friend and just be like, that makes sense. And, you know, love you anyway.
Yeah.
But that shame is huge for me too.
I think that we really nailed it when we think that our triggers come from shame and judgment. And I love what you said. I mean, like there's no one there judging us. So it's definitely internal, right? And I'm happy to hear your son's not keeping tabs on you being a perfect parent either. That's nice, right? What a good guy. Yeah, like shame is so heavy and it's just such a thread in our lives of just suffering, right? It's this veil of suffering that we wear, and we're beating ourselves up and self destructing over thoughts from really feelings from the past that are embedded in us, I think. Yeah, it's fascinating. Triggers come from shame, I think, early childhood, all of these wonderful comments. The next question, I think, is we've already gone into it, but I guess I was thinking about this question more about like the physical feeling. And you touched on a little bit, Amy, like you don't feel like you're present. Like for me, yeah. So I'll start with you, Andrea. What does it feel like when you're triggered?
It feels, I guess it feels sort of sudden.
Mm.
It feels sudden. It feels hot. It feels tight. It feels like I'm not in control anymore of myself. Yeah, the physiological sensations. Yeah, I guess that's a little sort of physiological and emotional feelings. I'm not in control, and I just hot and tight. Like my body just
Mhm.
tenses up. That's what it is for me.
Mm. Yeah, I can identify with that, and also it feels like this like righteous indignation. Like I always feel like whatever I'm saying is just so right. I'm laughing at myself right now. Because and I mean this is a really good insight into our kids, right? Because that's being triggered also feels like I'm a kid, but also, in those moments you can't convince me that actually I sound like a kid or that what I'm saying is really kind of ridiculous. It's only after that, you swallow a little bit of humble pie and you're like, yeah, as right as that felt in the moment, no, that's not what I want for myself.
Wow. I'm so glad I asked this question. First off, I could really feel what you were feeling, that tight and hot feeling, Andrea. Um, I feel cold actually. So I was like, wow, okay, I'm glad we're talking about this because I get cold, like physically cold, and my feet freeze, and like my feet feel like they're in ice, and I feel tingling on my skin. So like those are physical sensations, and I can feel it almost crawling across my feet, get cold, and I'm like, oh, retreat. And fear. When I'm triggered, I'm overwhelmed with this. Even saying this, I guess I feel a little emotional. Wow. I feel this overwhelming sense of being unsafe.
Mm.
And it goes back to my childhood for sure. And knowing, what's frustrating about that too. And you know what I think when I'm triggered too, I feel mad and frustrated that here it is again. Is that ever going to go away? Or, so I feel fear, I feel angry, I feel cold, and I'm scared, if that's fear and scared are the same thing. I think that's important to think about, um, that feeling and out of control. Like, here it goes again. Do I have any control of my life? You know? Yeah. Thank you both for answering that question. I didn't even realize how deep that was going to be when I wrote it down. We are brave today. We are brave. This is
We
a
are.
brave. Yeah, go team. Okay, next one. Let's hope it's a little lighter, but I think this topic is just might get heavier. Let's see. Andrea, what kinds of triggers are common for parents? You've named, oh, it's this way. You've named a couple.
Common triggers for parents. I feel a big one for me is not feeling heard. So having to repeat myself again and again and again, as a parent, that gets those feelings of not feeling heard, and I can link that back to my childhood where I'm trying to, be my authentic self, and I'm not feeling heard or respected from, the adults in my life, and so that I think is very triggering, not feeling heard. That's another common one for parents. I mean, I don't know if spills get other people riled up, but spills. I can't handle it. Common. I think also a trigger for me is just seeing intense emotion in my child, because when I was feeling intense emotions, again, this goes back to my childhood. When I was feeling intense emotions, I didn't have a parent that was helping me work through those feelings. It was like, go away. And when you have calmed down, you can rejoin sort of civilization. And so I never, couldn't. So when I see big feelings in my child, it's almost like I don't know how to deal with them, because I also was never given those tools to deal with big emotions. So I think seeing, a child or my children just be extremely emotional is triggering in and of itself. That's all I can think of right now.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, when my son gets angry, that's triggering for me for sure. It
Mm.
takes a lot of effort to not raise up to his level of anger. And the other thing is being late,
Mm.
or not even being late, just not being at my pace. And I don't know how many times a day I have to tell myself, um, you know, how would you like it if there was somebody just always telling you to go faster? And it's not like he's aware that he's going slow. He's just a little person, and he's just taking the appropriate amount of time to do things that little people do. Um, but for me, like, not always going as fast as you can given the situation is a trigger.
Wow. That's important to listen to. I like that you mentioned pacing. That's so powerful. There's so much we could unpack in just pacing of parenting itself. Um, Andrea, you're really touching on some really important points, right? Being heard, staying connected. And I was kind of referring in my mind, I was thinking about, wow, the work that we have as parents to prevent our kids from being adults that are triggered. Some of the suggestions, just in hearing what you were both talking, I was writing down, I was like, okay, so ensure kids are heard, like hold space for them as hard as it is for us, but also like stay connected. Like even if they're having those big emotions, find a way to stay connected and try to be comfortable in that space, like practice that, I think. And then the other thing you talked about, Amy, is like acknowledging the feelings of being rushed and that it's uncomfortable, and validating that, and recognizing our pacing and feeling rushed can send us out, you know. Um, yeah, the kinds of triggers that I hear are common for parents are definitely timeliness. So feelings of, having to rush or having to repeat directions. That's a big one. Sibling rivalry. So like when kids are nagging at each other, that's really difficult for parents. Another one I hear right now, I think is the most common trigger of all, used to be bedtime. Like the whole, like kids would go to bed and they're like, hungry, now I'm tired. I mean, now I'm thirsty, or I have to go to the bathroom, that whole dialogue at bedtime. But I think what's outbeating that one now in my experience is like screen time. So a lot of parents are being triggered because they want their kids to come off screen time and they don't come off. So there's like, that sends parents into like, but I guess that's more like the not listening to direction, that sort of thing. That's common for myself. My kids are older. So I was trying to think about like what triggers me now, with my adult kids, with them. What triggers me now is with my son, and I hope it's okay I talk about him here because I'm totally outing him in this situation, is that he's very focused and he's very, almost stoic. He's very clean cut guy. Like in his emotions, he's solid. He's a solid rock. And he's like that kind of guy. He'll talk about emotions. He's just very deliberate and he thinks very clearly. So sometimes I'm like, is he okay? Like, did he feel that? Right. But he'll be like, he did. So that kind of triggers me. I want him to be more emotional because that's what I'm used to. Right. So sometimes I get really triggered because he's so like, so deliberate and, even keeled. That can be triggering too. My daughter right now, the only thing that really triggers me with her, she's like my best friend, but I can go back to like, I'm outing her now, for teenage years. So she would throw it back at me pretty hard and name call or like be very persistent and call me out on all my flaws. Like she didn't hold back at all. She mirrored me and was like, yeah, blah, 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 and so I think having a very spirited child that we create this space for their emotions can be super difficult and triggering, for sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to also say, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt that, but you reminded me. I think another big one is not feeling respected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this also, again, comes back to, because when I was growing up, it was like, you respect your elders, you don't talk back. I'm the old wise one. So when I'm dealing with my toddler and they're not, listening, I feel disrespected. And that is triggering for me,
Mm-hmm.
And then I think just and also response to what you were saying, Danielle, I think another trigger is these feelings of uncertainty. Uncertainty, it is, part of our reality as humans, but it can be very unsettling. I don't know, maybe I don't know how you are responding emotionally. Why are you responding emotionally this way? And that feelings of uncertainty, I think, can also be triggering.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point.
Yeah, feelings of uncertainty, and then how we use that to point back to us in some way. Like if you think about walking by a person on the street and they're having a temper tantrum, and it's like, you just you don't step into it. It's not about you, but this idea that whatever our kids do is a reflection on us is like it just makes us want to fix everything, even though, 9 times out of 10, big emotions don't need to even be really addressed. They just need to be given space, and they'll come down. And our kids have so much capacity to just kind of, work through things on their own with a caring witness. But still, we want to jump in and do something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful. I love what you said, the caring witness. So true, right? We just want to jump in and fix that fixing problem. I think that leads into the next question. Well done, Amy. Nice segue. So, how might parents behave when triggered? I'm going to start off. We go into fix it mode or lecture mode or yelling mode. Those are really common ways that parents behave when triggered. Andrea?
I mean, it's funny that with that you say this question, because I've been on my journey for a couple of years now, really working on understanding my triggers. And so this question, how might a parent behave when triggered? My immediate thought is how I would respond now as someone who is practicing patience and compassion and kindness. And so, how might I don't know if this is the right response, but when I'm getting triggered, I have tried very hard to step back, take moments, take deep breaths, reflect why am I feeling this way? And I think knowing more about sort of child development and knowing, how our brains work, and when, we are experiencing intense emotions, that it starts to inhibit access to our rational thinking brain. And so when I'm feeling triggered, I actually start to use more language for myself to continue to access that prefrontal cortex that has my rational logical thinking. And so I'll start to say affirmations and positive mantras, and even something that I actually got from Brene Brown, when I'm feeling triggered by shame, I might say something like pain, 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 pain. I'm feeling pain. And just using language helps me sort of manage the trigger. But in terms of negative things that I would do when I'm feeling triggered, I definitely, it's so hard now because I've been doing this journey for so long, but yelling, I guess, would be my immediate go-to before I started my journey. Yelling, shaming behavior, blaming the child for their behavior. And then yes, definitely trying to make it better, because I don't like your intense emotions and I have to make it better because I'm uncomfortable and I need to fix it instead of letting them feel that. So I guess that's sort of a bit of a two-part answer of how parents behave and how I'm really actively trying to behave in a way that makes me feel okay after the trigger.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Um, might behave when triggered. I can also see a big difference in how I respond to triggers now compared to several years ago. Um, and I can say that my own feeling of safety and awareness from my environment of whether or not I was safe makes so much difference. I can't even put a number on it. Um, and what I've done, well, my situation has changed, but also what I've done is really worked intentionally to kind of calm my nervous system,
Mhm.
not while I'm triggered, but outside of it. So that just kind of overall, I have a better sense that in my environment these days, I'm pretty much always safe. Um, and I have nothing but compassion. I'll try not to get too emotional. Nothing but compassion for parents that do not feel safe in their current situation for whatever reason, and are dealing with a lot of conflict and adversity every day. Um, so yeah, what I used to do, even more than yelling, was to just kind of get away. Uh,
Mm.
and so this is kind of, I mean, in a way, it's good if you're going to lose it to put space between you and your child. I think as long as there's some communication. Like I used to just not be able to like see or hear them for a while and need to like go away and recover. I think looking back, it would have been better if I could have at least kept talking to them or, kept up some kind of connection, like you were saying, Andrea. It was more of just a trauma response, like, "I'm scared of you right now. I need to get away." Um,
Mm.
so, these days, I still do kind of get away, but it's much shorter.
Mm.
It's like turning around and seeing like, turning away from my kid and being like, "Oh, there's space out here," and then I can just, like, make a whole bunch of ridiculous noises or just, like, talk to the air, or just, like, flail my arms around and get it out a little bit more, um
Wow.
a little bit better, a little bit more connectivity and not needing to escape quite so much. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was my response was the running away.
You both, I'm really just hearing so much growth and attention to this. I'm glad we're talking about it because you're sharing such valuable knowledge and experience. And also, I want to highlight one of the arguments for Section 43 is that it's not possible to parent without force. And what you're both describing here is absolutely it is, right? When we take responsibility for our triggers and we acknowledge ourselves with compassion, it's possible. The other side to that that's coming up for me is recognizing, and what you were going with, Amy, and I was feeling emotional with you too, that parents who are triggered are more likely to yell or escalate into more violent measures, or even isolate kids and seclude them and use exclusionary measures and those kind of things that can be harmful. And recognizing that we do need this repeal, because this repeal can start an initiation from like multi sectors to support parents to break these cycles and acknowledge, compassionate remedies that might be available to them. So it's not just the children that suffer from violence when parents are triggered. It's the parents showing that they're suffering, and it's so important because kids really need parents that are healing, and also really deserve compassionate systems that support them and support the connection of them and their parents. So right now with the welfare policing system, the family policing system and protection system, it's just not showing up for kids in that compassionate kind of way. So I really appreciate your comments on that. It's important to talk about how parents deserve compassion. Big time. The next question, I think, is something, you know, we've all touched on already, but maybe if we could just quickly go through and come up with like maybe 3 top tips. How about, let's do 3 top tips. Andrea, what can help parents when they feel triggered?
3 top tips, feeling triggered. I guess I think we've touched on 2. So one of them is to change up, you know, the feeling of the room, the tone of the room. So I think we touched on, you know, wiggles, shaking it out, get movement, you know, just really sort of change up the moment. And I did say this before, but like mantras, you know, affirmations, like Amy said, you know, I'm safe, we're safe, I have what I need to handle this moment. And then I think my last piece of advice is to stay connected. You know, just try to keep that connection with your child. You know, work through your mantras. And if you need to step away, which is totally normal, I think in order to continue that connection, having that open and honest dialogue with your child about how you're feeling is important, because then you're modeling, you know, your boundaries and how you're feeling. And we all have intense emotions, you know. So I just would, if I had to step away, you know, I might say something like, I need a moment to go take some breaths, to step away. So because maybe, you know, because I'm feeling like I'm not being heard right now, and I need to come back with the solution. I love you. You know, so just being sort of open and honest, describe your feelings, you know, and a need, you know, and how you're feeling. You know, I think it's important to so they understand, you know, I have needs and I have emotions, and I feel like I'm not being heard. I'm feeling very frustrated right now. I need to step away so I can come back to this situation with some solutions. You know, I love you. I'll be right back. You know, and keeping that dialogue. That's sort of my top 3 things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So the first thing that I do when I'm feeling triggered, when I become aware of it, doesn't always happen, is I give myself a little bit of an awe, because, you know, this part that's coming out is a kid part. It's a young part. You know, it didn't get what it needed when it needed it. So I give myself a little bit of this. Or, you know, just wherever, just like, you know, I'm on my side. I'm gonna take care of myself and be nice to myself. Um, so that's one thing. The movement also is super important. And the shaking, like Andrea said, or sometimes I'll just brush stuff off me. Even as I'm doing it right now, I feel like there's something coming off my chest. I'm getting a little bit tingly. Um, so movement like that. And yeah, I'll just also piggyback on Andrea because she had all good ones. Naming the feeling. Naming the feeling. I'm getting a bit better at it. Um, I'm getting better at, I'm starting to get angry rather than, like, you know, 5
Yeah.
minutes into yelling or after yelling. It's like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I was angry." Starting to notice it, and a big part of that is being like, "It's okay if I get angry." Again, I'm gonna be on my own side here. I'm gonna be like, "I give myself permission to get angry. I get to be human." So, yeah, those.
Amazing. Wonderful. So good to hear. You know, these are excellent tips. I love the mantra idea, you know, and I think it's really difficult what you're saying to name a feeling in the moment. But I like what you're suggesting is at least acknowledge it even later. Like, I was feeling angry. You know, that's so validating to say, right? So I think that's really cool. 3 top tips that can help parents when they're triggered. I really like what you're saying. I'm going to piggyback off both of you right now. I think number 1 is to show compassion and find out where in your body you're holding that trigger. You know, maybe in your shoulders or your gut, wherever it is, but send some deep love into your bones, you know, and acknowledge that you're human and that it's okay, and that this is a time to love yourself, really. Easy to do? No. Important? I think so. The second thing I think that's really important, I love the idea of movement. So, even incorporating exercise into your routine, I notice myself when I'm working out more, I'm less triggered overall, right? So movement is so good. I love the idea of wiggling it out. That's so important. The other thing I think is, well, I said it. So validate your feelings, send self-love into your body, compassionate, and recognize your body, like acknowledge, like I said, like what you said, like being physical, like wipe it off, like give love. And yeah, thank you both so much. This is such good information. Like I'm gonna have to watch this again to remind myself. Okay, I think we're gonna be on the last question here. So this is gonna be the last question, and I think it kind of broadens out everything. And then I just want to go over these amazing notes because I think we've ended up with some really great tips for parents to break these cycles through this conversation. So the final question is, who is responsible for protecting people and parents from being triggered? Andrea.
Who is responsible for protecting people and parents from being triggered? I mean, I think that the responsibility is it's my responsibility. It's my responsibility to sort of, I'm a big believer in sort of lifelong learning, and if I'm not learning, I'm not growing. And you know, being able to educate myself on, there's so much knowledge out there, and being able to educate myself on how I can, be self-aware and practice mindfulness and know my triggers and know who I am and know that I'm worthy. And ultimately, I think that, a lot of it can be pushed to the government with this repeal, because when we push that repeal, it forces sort of the education on respectful, positive parenting. So I think there's definitely a responsibility element for the government to step in and say, hey, hitting children is not okay, because the research is very clear. But I think just on an individual level, it's definitely my responsibility as a parent, which I wholeheartedly believe is a privilege to be, to take those steps, to break those cycles, and know myself, get back to my authentic self that I know, because of toxic generational cycles, was squished down in favor of the person that needs to be out in the universe, that kind, yes sir, what can I do to make everybody else's life happy person at the cost of my authenticity. So I think, coming back and relearning is my responsibility as a human.
Amy?
Yeah. Well, that last part you said is just so exciting. Yeah, that, that we can do that for ourselves, that we can help create an environment for kids where they can do that. It's not black and white, but, to a greater extent, to live in their authenticity from childhood, rather than, having to unpack and wade through and disidentify with so much as adults. I mean, and like I said, it's not black and white, but that is an exciting thought. Um, Responsible for protecting people and parents from being triggered. Well, for protecting people, and parents from violence, and these really, the horrible things that can come from being triggered. Yeah, I think it's our responsibility as parents, to keep keep that from getting on our kids as much as we can. And of course, the government's responsibility to act appropriately when it does happen and people are harming each other. Um, I don't know if I can really protect myself from being triggered, but I think I can respond to my trigger in a certain way. I think I can choose kind of how to respond, right? The trigger is like our body's automatic safety cue or automatic response to threat. Like, it's so fast.
Yeah.
And, it really is meant to keep us safe, even though a lot of times we end up hurting people when we are triggered. But when I am triggered, I'm responsible to look at that, to do something with that. And we did talk a lot about alternate ways of parenting when we're triggered, being compassionate to ourselves when we're triggered. So I think
Mhm.
both of those are really, really good things to try to do when we're triggered.
Both of you, thank you. This is a hard question, and I was really thinking that I wanted it to come down to this because, in thinking about parenting and recognizing it is a parent's responsibility to break these cycles, we all want to, right? And with the repeal, then there's more clarity on what our responsibilities are, and there will be more opportunity for parents to practice safe and positive parenting practices. And so a lot of what we were talking about is like it's almost like parents are pivots, as activists and speaking up and saying we need laws and regulations around us to support our change, right? If I'm sitting on a wait list for 2 years to get support, that's not really helpful, right? So as adults, to take action and be participatory citizens is really important so that generations after us can have access to support as well. And then as parents, to recognize our role and who we are and send compassion to ourselves so our kids can witness that and recognize different tools and strategies. What came up with me most was, the idea that we can practice skills as parents that will improve, our stress. And so practicing positive parenting practices, and there's so many strategies to access. And there's lots of information online, but there's also access to, individual interventions and all kinds of things. So I think that's really important to think about, our responsibility and to recognize that we are going to be triggered and that we still need to stay in the conversation. So that's a big one for me because I retreat. And what can happen is I can get mad at the people that have triggered me. And, but if we do that in the sense of looking at social justice issues, nobody's going to be having these dialogues because being triggered is normal. And so entering into hard conversation is really important. Before we close today, I just thought we'd do a quick round as takeaways, and then I want to summarize these a whole list. I don't know if you can see it. Whole list of parenting tips brought to you by the lovely Andrea and Amy today on how to break the cycles. So Andrea, what's your big takeaway? And then Amy, what's your big takeaway for today?
I would say my biggest takeaway is, again, just coming back to compassion for ourselves, compassion for other parents, and just a reminder that that changing and breaking these cycles, it is a daily practice. It is not easy. It's really hard, and just being consistent and just knowing that it's hard, and we're all in this together to break these cycles, to raise children who are resilient, and they're going to better the world for us. They're gonna have we break these cycles, they do a little bit better than us, and then we're gonna have a society of like kind, compassionate individuals who don't look to violence.
Yeah, my big takeaway is that change is made by the imperfect parents who are stumbling along as we're learning and growing, and right in the messy middle, and just committed to keep trying and to keep advocating for ourselves as parents and for children. So I just feel
Amazing.
like I'm in such good company with both of you.
I am going to highlight the messy middle here. If there's any word, any phrase that really means a lot when I study justice, it's the messy middle. If we go too far either way, it's just going to get messier. So stay in the messy middle. We're not perfect. And that's, such good advice, I think, on how to be a great parent. There is none, except if you're in the messy middle and accepting the messy. I think that's a great parent. So I want to go through this wonderful list really quick as we close out our day. So thank you everyone for joining us out there. Here is the final list on how to break cycles when you can, when you can't, or whatever. But anyway, here's a list. First off, be heard. So children need to be heard. Create space for hearing them. Stay connected to kids. Hold space for all emotion. Amy said, be a caring witness, which I think is an amazing term. Feelings love being rushed and timeliness and pacing. Address those so that you can minimize conflict times. Respect children, because as adults, when we're not respected, that's going to be a trigger. So make sure you set your kids up for success and respect them. Clear expectations and predictability can really help reduce those moments of being triggered. Say, I love you. One of you said it. And I think we, like, to ourselves, to our kids, say it more often. I think that's important. Validate yourself. Use self-compassion. Validate our kids. Validation is a very underused skill. Clarify, validate, make sure you understand what people feel. Understand yourself. Communicate feelings and needs. I think that's, you know, such an important piece. If you want to know more about that, Marshall Rosenberg. Change up the moment, use movement however you can. Mantras are important. Self-awareness. Encourage children's authentic self. We don't own them. We don't know who they are until they show us who they are, and then shine a light on that. The other one was self-awareness and practice skills to solve problems so that you can have more confidence in times of conflict. What do you both think of that list?
It's great.
Pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome. Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I don't think we had any viewers, and that is okay because it's going to be on YouTube forever now. And I am so grateful for both of you joining us. We will be back again next week. So please do comment, like, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook at No Violence for Kids Canada. Get together with your people, talk about the repeal to end corporal punishment against children in Canada. Write to your MP, your senator, write an op-ed, whatever you need to do. Stand on the side of the road with a sign. It doesn't matter. We need to make some noise. We are ready to repeal Section 43. In what year, Andrea? Amy?
2023.
2023.
You got it. Thank you all.
Okay.